You're watching Black in Canada, and I'm your host, Ricardo McCrae. Today, we bring you another episode in our series of conversations that matter. With the recent passing of Nelson Mandela, we reflect on his life, his legacy, and what it meant to us, and what lessons we can learn moving forward. Del Miller is a business technology consultant with a fascination for blogging, social networking, and you can find him on Twitter at Del Miller. We have Dr. Christopher Stewart Taylor. Dr. Taylor is an academic, historian, blogger, and lecturer. Some of his favorite things to speak on would be race, class, and Black identity. You can find him on Twitter at Dr. C.S. Taylor. And finally, we have Darren Baptiste. Darren creates mobile apps and travels by motorcycle. Most recently, he took a trip from Toronto all the way down to Toco in Trinidad and Tobago, and he's written a book about it. You can connect with him on Twitter at Darren Baptiste. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
How do you go from Toronto to Trinidad on a motorcycle?
Take your time. You take your time, for sure. So, Nelson Mandela. I mean, today this is what we're going to talk about. What are some of your favorite memories of Nelson Mandela? And I want to start with Del, because you wrote a recent blog post about Nelson. This is the post that I saw that caught my eye, and it talked about Nelson Mandela, power, presence, and patience, lessons I need to learn. And it was wonderful to talk about him and his life. So what were really some of your earliest memories of knowing or being aware of Nelson Mandela?
Well, as a young youth growing up in Jamaica, apartheid was definitely something that I learned about when I was really early, because it's a part of the culture, it's a part of the music, it's something that we sing about. And I think Jamaica is a country that was ahead of most nations in the fight for the abolition of apartheid and the freedom of Nelson Mandela. So as a Jamaican, it was definitely a part of what my education was about. And I do remember the day when Mandela came out of prison. It was broadcast on TV. I was there with a whole bunch of friends and family watching him walk out with Winnie. So Mandela was definitely a part of my psyche growing up early.
And what was that like to see him walking out of prison?
Well, at the time, I knew Mandela was an important figure in the apartheid fight, but it's only been more recently that I've really studied him and really understood more clearly what apartheid really was. But at the time, seeing him come out of prison, it felt like all that singing and all that reggae music and all those songs actually did something. That's what I thought. I thought all these reggae singers were contributing to the fight of freedom and getting Mandela out of prison. So as a Jamaican at the time, I felt proud knowing that we supported the right thing.
Nice. And Chris, what are some of your earliest memories of Mandela that you can share with us?
For me, it's a little bit different, because as a younger generation, for me it was his legacy. Like, I can't. Yes, I was alive during when he was let out of prison and the end of apartheid. But for me, it was really learning about what he did and his impact, not only as president of South Africa, but his impact globally. So for me, my first and my most recognizable image was him as a global ambassador for freedom and equal rights. And so that's one of the biggest things that I remember. Not even say remember. That's what I live, and that's what I've embodied about Nelson Mandela, his global presence, his global ambassador of who he is. I'm not going to say who he was, but who he is as a global figure.
Mm-hmm. And Darren, I want to hear from you as well. I know you had some memories going back to the University of Windsor. We both went to the big bad University of Windsor. What do you remember about Nelson Mandela and first hearing about him?
Well, for me, I really recall that his presence was phenomenal. I never had a chance to meet the man, but learning about what he had gone through and his part in the struggle down in South Africa, because he was always a scrappy fighter, from the position of he was a lawyer, but even his approach to the law was one based on not acquiescing to the powers that be, but fighting the fight on all levels, right? And so he was always ready to fight whatever was in front of him, even in a formal courtroom, and then, what he put up with during his 27 years of imprisonment, of never breaking from his principles. That to me was the astonishing thing, because I think by the time he really came into my consciousness, he had probably been in jail at least 20 years.
Wow.
And hadn't broken.
Yeah, that was
powerful.
Yeah, for me, that was one of those things that sticking to his principles that I really admired. And I remember seeing him come out of prison, and the most beautiful thing for me was the grace and poise and commitment to his principles that he stuck with. And he was just like, it was like 27 years in prison. He came out and he said, yeah, like I was saying, we need to change this system of apartheid. And it was like unwavering commitment to his mission. And it was like, man, wow. Like anybody who can take that type of, I don't want to say beat down, but take that kind of pressure and then come out as a peaceful, committed person is just remarkable to me. And that, for me, was one of the most striking things about his life and his legacy. So, Chris, let's switch it up a bit. What do you think the life of Nelson Mandela, like, what does that mean for Black people and everyone else in the world?
I think it's twofold. I'll speak specifically because we're here Black in Canada. I think specifically for Black Canadians, I think it's very twofold. I think it's that we need to start looking beyond our geographical boundaries, beyond the 49th parallel, and beyond just looking at the United States for these representations of who we are as Black people. This Black identity that can change, and this Black identity that comes in a multifaceted way of seeing the world. Right. Also, too, without getting too much deep into the whole theoretical idea of how I see the world, but also
please do. This is a place where you can get into it. I want to see you get into it. I'd love to hear your position in the world.
Because yes, we look at Nelson Mandela, and we look at Nelson Mandela as Black Canadians as I don't even say a lightning rod for Black people. And my thing too, I think we need to start looking at what Canada's role was during apartheid. We hear about, yes, Canada, especially people like Diefenbaker, people like Diefenbaker, who, so we're looking at late 50s, late 60s, early 60s, opposed apartheid. However, we don't recognize that officials from South Africa came to Canada to study our reserve system, to make that work to subjugate and marginalize Black people. Yeah. We forget about that part, or we don't learn that part. We just learn about, oh yes, Nelson Mandela represents who we are as Canadians. I'm like, pause. These are the same individuals that put him in prison, and he was trying to fight against that. So I think we need to start broadening our minds to how he operated and what he represented within the system of apartheid.
And most people don't even realize that South Africans came to Canada to learn how to set up apartheid.
Exactly. We don't talk about it. Nobody mentions it. We just mention how we fought against apartheid. But wait a second. A few years earlier, we were the ones that created it. Exactly.
Yeah. Darren, what do you have to say about
that? Well, there's so much to say.
Pick one thing and share it with us, sir.
What was going through my mind is the idea of the constancy of belief, of staying true to purpose. I said that in my opening bit there, and that to me is the strongest thing, is that he had a commitment to something and stuck with it. He stuck with the core of it, but he changed his actual strategy and tactics along the way.
Right.
So as a man, Mandela is a phenomenal hero figure in doing something that most humans aspire to do, and was able to see it through to the end. But that doesn't remove him from being someone I can have political differences with and critiques of, while still holding him in high regard for what he did as a man.
Absolutely. And Del, what do you think Nelson Mandela means to Black people? What does he
Um,
mean to you?
he's definitely an iconic figure and someone who we could aspire to be like. But one of the things that I'm trying to remind myself about is that this may kind of sound a bit blasphemous, but Mandela was a person,
Yeah.
right? Mandela was a man. He was a human being. He was a regular guy, just like any one of us here in Canada, U.S., or wherever. Um, so I think Mandela was definitely a person of personal conviction and someone who stuck to his own personal beliefs. And what he became, I think, was a natural consequence of those core beliefs being in the environment that it was in, right? If Mandela had grown up in the United States, I think he probably would have been a very iconic figure as well, or very dead,
Mm.
um, because it's either one or the other, right? So I think if we look at Mandela as an example of someone that we should aspire to be like, we should really aspire to be someone of personal conviction, someone that holds true to our hopes and fight regardless of what the outcome may look like,
Now he
right?
was called. He's been labeled as a terrorist.
Yes,
And you
yes.
said, and you
Yeah.
mentioned this in your article. It said terrorist or globally loved leader. Who is he for
Right.
you?
For me, you got to be careful how you use this word terrorist. You know, it's going to be this session is going to be flagged, and it will be analyzed. So as a disclaimer, none of us here are really terrorists. We're just discussing the topic of being terrorists.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
right. So in any case, so I think was Harriet Tubman a terrorist? Were people from my background in Jamaica, was Paul Bogle a terrorist? Was Kojo a terrorist? Were any of these freedom fighters terrorists? And I think it's a matter of perspective, right? If I were in Nelson Mandela's position, I probably would have done the same thing, and I probably would have been labeled a terrorist. But history has proven over time that his philosophy and his reasons and his motives were just, and
Yeah.
the system was incorrect. So I think, we got to be careful how we use this word terrorist or terrorism, who we label as terrorists, because it could be the labeler that is the one that is truly the terrorist, right?
Truly.
Terrorizing people and reducing them to chattel or cattle or whatever you want to
Right.
say, right?
Yeah, it's
Burdens.
one of those ways in which traditional bastions of power use you break someone's uh, their character. You
Mhm.
assassinate their character, which makes it easy to do things to people that are unjust in any other circumstance. So by starting by labeling people and marginalizing people is one of those ways in which, uh, and I'm sure Chris could talk a lot more about this, in which people are begin to be removed from a system or eliminated. So
Yeah,
how do
and
you think?
so-
Yeah, please jump in.
and that's what I find interesting with Dell's message there, but how we label and yourself too, Ricardo, how we label people, and I think it pushes further too about how we create or recreate the memories of
Yeah.
people,
Mhm.
their images. So, say for example, the image that we have of Nelson Mandela is not an image of this quote unquote terrorist. Yes, the
Right.
information is there, but we have this image of somebody who, and I think that was one of the debates of, I can't say about him because I can't tell what a man was thinking. Like nobody can tell what somebody was thinking, but how do I reconcile this hate, or not necessarily this hate, but this situation where I had the oppressors try to eliminate me and destroy who I am as a human being, but how can I reconcile that to come out of prison and say, you know what, I am bigger and better than that? And so that's the image that has been recreated, not just recreated, but that's the image that has been frozen in time
Right.
of who Mandela is. And on the flip side, if you look at somebody like Malcolm X, and that's why I'm glad Dell brought up this comparison if Mandela was in the United States. Malcolm X was going through this exact same transformation. He was going through this transformation of becoming a bigger and better person, especially after his trip to Mecca. But then now we have this memory of Malcolm X as just this terrorist.
Right.
And that's the image that has been stuck.
So
and that's
seared into the psyche of society.
And it's still the powers at be, the people who control the way that information is disseminated, that keep on perpetuating these images of what they want these black people to be. So Mandela, since he loved, or seemingly loved, white people and seemingly forgave white people, that image is going to be something that's going to be recreated and taught to our children and our children's children. So it's very difficult.
How do you think he should be remembered?
I think he should be remembered as a whole. I think how you use the word terrorist or not, I think we should look at, yes, Mandela was a womanizer. Mm-hmm. Yes, Mandela depends on how you see it. He was a freedom fighter, a quote-unquote terrorist. He was all these things. I think we should look at a human being, and I'm glad Dell brought this up, that Mandela was a person. He was not a demigod. He was not a god. He was not a saint. He was a person. And that image it'll be better put forth to children to say, you know what, you can be normal. You can come up from whatever situation you came to go to great things. And I think that is something that we need to put out to everybody. He was a human being.
Yes, I agree.
That's very, very true. It's it's the creating the idol, that the perfection.
Exactly.
You know, people, like, you know, sometimes, I mean, we all do different things in the world, and people would say, oh, how do you do this, and what did it take? And it's just like, I just did it. Like, there's not really that much difference between you doing something. You know, like, the situation and the circumstances change, but everybody can do something. So this, as Dell said and as Chris echoed, it is remembering that he is a human being.
Yes.
That sacrificed not only personally in his personal life, and in many other ways as well, but who's just literally a man who did something, who stood for something that made a difference for a lot of people. And that's all it takes. It really just takes someone standing up and saying, I'm going to be the one to do this. He wasn't elected to that position. It was like, you volunteer to do those types of things in life. So how do you think he'll be remembered, Derek?
Well, that last bit you said, that really stuck with me, because we are fortunate here in Toronto that we see a very local example of exactly that whole thing, of someone who's been made into an iconic figure, but is really just a man doing his thing, and in the package of Dudley Laws. And
Absolutely.
He was a man who just did what he needed to do, what he felt convicted to do, and took a lot of slings and arrows his ways over his time, sacrificed himself and his family, but to follow his convictions, and we all reap the benefits of that. And for me, one of the things about men...
For many, many years, I mean, Dudley Law's charge.
Yes.
Just the name.
There's a whole cadre of people who came up at the same time, and which was great for them. They had the support, the moral support, and actual on-the-ground support of like-minded people in the city around growing up together. But what I was going to say is, one of the things that, of the memories, one of the key figures who brought Mandela to my consciousness was the singer Gil Scott-Heron, and his songs and work about what's going on in South Africa and anti-apartheid. And one of the key songs, he didn't write it about Mandela, but it was called "Ain't No Such Thing as a Superman," and just speaking to the fact that everybody can and everybody has to do something, and let's not just wait for the big man to show up and save us, but we all have to do our thing. And Mandela is someone who needs to be remembered in the light of someone who said, I am going to do what I can do to make this difference. He didn't wait for Superman.
That notion of doing what you can with what you have, with where you are right now, is one of my favorite. That's one of the mottos that I take in my life, of don't wait for perfection. Don't wait for the right time. It's like, if the thought takes you, and it's, do it. It's like, you have something to say it. If you have something you'd like to create or see in the world, go get it done, because these thoughts and ideas and change and opinions, once they come to you, you become aware of them. All this way, you can never forget them. It's like, once they enter your mind, you're like, okay, this is going to haunt me. I've got to do something with it. So really taking the time and respecting yourself and your community, and just actually doing those little things that make that difference, and taking personal responsibility for making that happen is one of those mottos I use in my life. So It was really good.
Well, one thing, if I could add, please.
Please.
As we're in a Black in Canada forum here, and you talked about the how Black people will be impacted or have been impacted by Nelson Mandela and his life and legacy. And I think one of the key things is that it's really not about color, right? The injustice that was going on to the Africans, the Black Africans, and the colored people in South Africa, as terrible as it is, and as obviously racist as it was and still is, the fix to it wasn't to drown yourself in race-based conversations. The fix is looking for the social justice in it, is to raise up the people to be strong and to get justice on their own. That's why, for instance, politically speaking, the communist movement was a far stronger supporter of anti-apartheid than the Western capitalist countries ever were. Right? So it's because for them it's about social justice. It wasn't simply about race. Right. And we need to understand that in Canada, that it wasn't just this Black man overcame something. It was people struggled together to get a level of justice for humans.
Human rights
that's
being the foundation of this rather than Black rights. They're like, no, it's human rights. Like people deserve better than that. You deserve better than that. So it's, Chris, you have something to join?
Yeah, I was going to add to that too, and I'm glad Darren brought that up, that I think especially now, I'm speaking for myself now, but I'm going to say we as Black Canadians get stuck on this idea that it's race. Yes, it's racial discrimination, there's anti-Black racism, especially in the GTA and in Canada. However, if we start promoting that we want to have this social justice of human rights and treating everybody equally, whether you're a man, you're a woman, transgender, transsexual, whatever it may be, then you're going to start eliminating seeing people through color. And it's going to be a much easier path. You're going to have so many more allies for your cause, for treating people equally. And I think fundamentally that's what we want. You know, we want to be treated like a person. I want to be able to walk down the street and be treated like another human being, no matter what color I am, no matter how my hair is, and so on and so forth. And I'm glad Darren brought that up. It's something that we need to start changing this paradigm. Yes, I understand that race and class, these intersectionalities exist. Like I understand that, and to be Black, we face an added form of oppression. I understand that. However, at the same time, we also need to recognize that our struggle is the same struggle or a similar struggle to the First Nations in Canada. You know, we need to start bringing these allies and bridging these gaps to push us forward so that we can succeed as humans in Canada.
Right. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Thank you. Yes.
It's like if you're getting beat down, I'm getting beat down.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah. It reminds me of this post-traumatic slave syndrome. And she was looking at America and looking at South Africa and really saying, why has South Africa made such rapid strides to move and harmonize the society at a much faster rate than the United States when we consider things like slavery and the legacy in America. And she boiled it down to this after traveling there for many weeks and talking to people, both Black and white, and what's going on? And everybody's like, no, this happened and we're dealing with it and we're moving forward. And she said, fundamentally, it comes down to this. South Africa, the government actually apologized publicly and globally for what they did with apartheid. And that acknowledgement of doing wrong is the foundation of moving forward. And she goes, America has not done that as yet. And that is the reason that a lot of these issues still exist and permeate the American society. You want to talk a bit about that?
I want to jump on that for
all right, Del, you're up. Go for it, sir.
Because if you were to compare the United States and South Africa, there's an interesting difference between the United States and South Africa. Because for one, the United States, the issues that happen in the United States, yes, they were systematic, and they last a lot longer.
Yes.
Right. The system was longer.
You're right.
The transition took a great deal of time. to happen. We only have a black president now, right, in the United States.
Yeah.
But if you were to consider Mandela's or South Africa's situations, Mandela came out of prison, and the leader of the ANC, we had an election, right, where one man, one vote, and then he was president. So the transition from minority rule to majority rule was a lot swifter in South Africa. And the government that apologized to the people was now a government of the majority of the people. Right, so it's an entirely different situation between South Africa and the United States. They're not really the same thing, right? And if you were to look at that, but I would agree with the statement that, you know, where we fully put an issue on the table and discuss it, I think healing will happen faster. And if the perpetrators of injustice were to admit that they were unjust and apologize to the victims of their injustice, I think healing would happen faster. The people of South Africa had that opportunity to deal with things straight up, upfront, and quickly. That situation never happened in the United States, and in most places across the world, I would think it never happened. It never happened here in Canada, right? Because if you consider, a lot of people never felt that the government took them seriously or apologized. Our prime minister just apologized since, just when I say recently, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, to the Japanese, right? And whatnot, right? But these things, they don't happen here in North America, right?
I know Chris is jumping to get in on this one. Chris, what do you have to say about this? I know you're I saw you like
you're edging.
Like, come on, let me get in on this.
No, because Del brought up something very important. We always like to compare the United States and South Africa like they're the only two black countries in the world. Right. And with that have black intellectuals. It really drives me crazy. I mean, if you want to have a better transition, okay, if you want to have a better comparison, and say, okay, well, why is it taking the United States so long, and how come South Africa so quickly? Okay, how about let's look at the decolonization of the West Indies. I mean, slave populations, from their inception, they were slave islands. And then you have an election, and blam, you have black majority rule. In places like Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad, well, Trinidad is a slightly different case, especially with the dynamic of bringing in Indians from the subcontinent. Then you have this black rule of countries that have, well, yes, the IMF and the World Bank, we're not going to get into that, but have become thriving as black countries. So it's difficult when you look at the United States that is not a black majority. You don't really need to reconcile with somebody who's a minority. If you're the person in power, there's no fear. There's no fear of a black revolt when you are the majority. In South Africa, you have to make that change because you are physically threatened by a majority. So you really don't have a choice but to reconcile.
So you think Americans don't apologize because they just don't have to?
They don't have to.
When I say Americans, I'm talking about the white majority in America, or the establishment, the government, the officials.
It's the same thing in Canada. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's even worse than that. It's not just the white majority in Canada or America who aren't interested in apologizing. Most everybody who lives here, including blacks and other minorities, believe the same thing. We all believe in the American dream over here. That's the official religion of North America, is the American dream. And the American dream tells us very clearly that everything is good. If you don't got it, it's on you. Exactly. So you are solely to blame for anything you find yourself, any problem you find yourself in. And that notion, it's called the American dream, but it's a global phenomena, and that's driving a lot of. There's horrendous violence going on right now in South Africa because of the inequality, the massive inequality that exists amongst people, even post-black government, right? Because now they're getting a taste of this whole. They had formerly before said we're going to, look and fight for the equality of everyone, but now everybody's sort of on their own. We're officially equal now.
Right.
If you don't got it,
start the race. Everybody
it's on you.
Yeah, go for it.
And that's fundamental in a liberal democratic society. Like, people don't understand that. It's fundamental in a liberal democratic society for social inequality. Like, you have to have inequality to have a liberal democratic society. And so if you think, okay, we're all equal now, then no. You know what I mean?
Like, what is equal?
What is equal?
Like, what is
you know,
equal?
we have equal chance to get further, but I'm gonna step on your head to get mine in my chase for the American dream.
Right.
Del, what do you want to say about that?
I want to put another topic on the table here for a second.
Gosh,
Let's consider this for a moment. I'm
Let's do it.
putting on my capitalist hat for a moment.
Oh boy, watch out, Mr. Technology.
So just think about this for a moment, right? So you have a country like South Africa, which the natives are the majority, and they're blacks, right? They're native Africans. The minority that had power were whites, and they controlled all the economic power in that country, right, for one. When you had a switch or a change in government, if I were in power and I'm now the new government, I have to consider the economical viability of my country moving forward, right, and the entire population moving forward. So there are certain real issues that Mandela had to deal with and address. And he knew if there was a flight of money and power from this country, then his country would now decline over time. And then that would necessarily help the people that he was fighting for in the first place. So there's some real economic issues that he believed he had to address. There's a book I just went through, right? It was written by Richard Branson. And it's a cool book. You should pick it up and take a look. It's called "Screw It, Let's Do It." And there's a situation. So Richard Branson was really good friends with Mandela, and there's a situation that he recounts in this book. And there was a chain of health clubs in South Africa that wasn't doing very well economically, right? They were about to fail,
Right.
and he called up Richard and he said, look, this is the situation that we're in. If these clubs fail, it would mean that individuals with jobs would lose their jobs. And a lot of these clubs employed blacks in South Africa, which meant that these black people would be out of jobs, right? Could you take a look at this for me and tell me if there's something you could do to help? So Richard flew down to South Africa, he looked at this business, and he eventually bought it, and it became Virgin Active South Africa, right? He took over the chain, and it's been doing pretty good, but it maintained the business, and it ensured employment for blacks in South Africa, right? Blacks were not the only ones working there, but these are some of the things that, you know, as a politician or as the government or someone that's truly for the heart of the people, you have to think of these things. So the whole reconciliation process, it was necessary emotionally and mentally that it took place, but economically it was also very important that it was addressed and dealt with. And I think Mandela, as a freedom fighter and a person of, you know, smarts, knew he had to do this. But in the case of the United States, if you use it as an example, they never had the same dynamics that they had to address. It was white rule, white majority, and they controlled everything. And all of a sudden, the minority were released or freed. They were never a threat, right? There was no real impelling reason to apologize to anyone. Right? And I think that was probably the main reason why it was never done. There was no point. That's how they saw it. There was no point in doing so.
Well, I think that's a compelling space to end our talk today. You know, as we think about Nelson Mandela, his life, his legacy, and what it means to us. I mean, I know we can go on for another 2-3 hours.
Yeah, this should have been a long discussion. I don't like.
Yeah, you just opened up a can of worms there.
Well, I'm gonna have to make some worm soup. We're gonna have to have everybody back on. We're gonna have to definitely continue this discussion here on Black in Canada. And I want to thank everyone for joining me, Del, Dr. Taylor, Darren. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts candidly. And what legacy and what lessons from his life are you taking and moving forward and using in your own life? Leave a comment below on our website. Join the conversation. My name is Ricardo McCrae. I'm your host, and we will see you next time.